All right, today Ron Paul appears to have suffered a mini stroke. They call it a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, which is basically a mini stroke. They say it's really a major warning. This is a temporary blockage of blood flow to the brain. But he had it on air while he was producing his Ron Paul Liberty Report, and here's what that looked like right here.
It has to be liquidated. We have to get rid of that. That's a burden. We can barely just kind of
It's Dr. Paul.
It has to be liquidated. We have to get rid of that. That's a burden.
This is reported on by the from the New York Post. Says Ron Paul hospitalized after he appears to suffer a stroke during a live stream. Ron Paul, a former Texas congressman, presidential candidate, and father of Senator Rand Paul, suffered an apparent stroke-like illness in the middle of a live stream Friday afternoon. He's 85 years old. And this is the guy who basically changed the landscape of politics, at least in 2008 and 2012, and introduced a whole lot of people to the concept of free markets and individual liberty and auditing and ending the Federal Reserve. And I just want to let you know, just the end from the beginning here, according to Fox News, he's in good spirits. Here's a picture of him right here with the thumbs up. It says, "Message from Ron Paul, I'm doing fine. Thank you for your concern." And I wanted to go over just a couple quick highlights from 2012 from the presidential debates. Here's Jim Cramer asking him a question. Jim Cramer, of course, is a Keynesian who wants the Federal Reserve to print more money so that they can continue with the illusion of prosperity in America.
We were down 400 points today. We're not going to be done going down if this keeps going up. If Italy the rates keep going up. Surely you must recognize that this is a moment-to-moment situation for people who have 401ks and IRAs on the line, and you wouldn't just let it fail. Just go away and take our banking system with it.
No, you have to let it.
Yeah, there's Jim Cramer saying, "Hey, we need to pump liquidity into the market. We need to flood it with easy credit from the Federal Reserve. You don't want to demolish the entire system, do you?" See, there's a free market answer to the Keynesian question. Keynesians just want to continue printing money, and they want to continue going on credit and try to spend our way out of this. And that's not the way you do it. That's only kicking the can down the road. Ron Paul recognized this, and he's the only one who stuck to his guns for decades and decades, standing on principle and not playing politics.
You have to let it liquidate. We took 40 years to build up this worldwide debt. We're in a debt crisis never seen before in our history. The sovereign debt of this world is equal to the GDP as ours is in this country. If you prop it up, you'll do exactly what we did in the Depression, prolong the agony. If you prop it up, you do what Japan has done for 20 years. So yes, you want to liquidate the debt. The debt is unsustainable. And this bubble was predictable because 40 years ago, we had no restraints whatsoever on the monetary authorities.
And everybody thought we had a bubble back then in 2011. This is from November 10th, 2011. Now, 9 years, almost 10 years later in 2020, we've got a debt bubble that they couldn't even have conceived of a decade ago.
We piled debt on debt, we pyramided debt, we had no restraints on the spending, and if you keep bailing people out and prop it up, you just prolong the agony as we're doing in the housing bubble. Right now, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are demanding more money because we don't allow the market to determine what these mortgages are worth. If you don't liquidate this and clear the market, believe me, you're going to perpetuate this for a decade or two more, and that is very, very dangerous.
And here we are a decade later, and it is indeed very, very dangerous. Kicking the can down the road, hyperinflating that debt bubble. Once that thing pops, it's going to be all bets off, and people are going to be running for the doors.
Ron Paul, you have said you want to close down agencies. Tell us about your tax plan as well as closing agencies, federal agencies. Where do those jobs go?
Well, eventually they go into the private sector. They don't all leave immediately when the plan goes into the effect. But what my plan does is it addresses taxes in a little different way. We're talking about the tax code, but that's the consequence, that's the symptom. The disease is spending. Every time you spend, spending is a tax. We tax the people, we borrow, and then we print the money, and the prices go up, and that is a tax. So you have to address the subject.
And right there is the hidden tax called inflation, which wouldn't be around if we had the easy money system, if we didn't have the easy money system of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve prints the money, hyperinflates the currency, then every dollar that you own gets devalued. Basically, what they're saying is when you have a dollar bill, this is basically a product of your time and laboring energies. So the Federal Reserve, when they pump liquidity into the market or launch QE infinity or whatever they want to call it, whatever the euphemism they want to call it, listen, when the Federal Reserve gets involved, the only tool they have in their tool chest is debt. So when you have this container, it's the product of your time and laboring energies called the dollar. It's really a Federal Reserve note. It's a note of debt. Every one of those you hold, when they continue to print more, they dilute the money supply and they diminish your purchasing power. So they basically say, hey, you know that time and laboring energy you invested in producing these notes? Well, we just devalued that time and laboring energy. All that blood, sweat, and tears, well, we don't think much of it. That's why we can keep pumping liquidity into the market. And that's what Ron Paul was always against. He's been against it from day one.
Spending, that is the tax. That is the reason I go after the spending. I propose in the first year, cut $1 trillion out of the budget in 5 departments.
In 5 departments, that is something no politician wants to do. Why? Because they're Title 28, Section 3002, 15A corporate employees who are looking out only for corporate interests, not the interests of the American people. They're interested in padding their own pockets and increasing their own power and increasing their own wealth to the detriment of everybody that they say they're there to protect and serve.
Now, the other thing is that you must do if you want to get the economy going again is you have to get rid of price fixing. And the most significant price fixing that goes on that gave us the bubble, destroyed the economy, and is preventing this from coming out is the price fixing of the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates way below market rates. You have to have the market determine interest rates if you want a healthy, viable economy.
So you think?
Do you think you are ever going to hear a Joe Biden say that or a Kamala Harris? Did you ever hear a Hillary Clinton say that? Will you ever hear a Donald Trump say exactly what he said? This guy doesn't want to just audit the Fed. He wants to end the Fed because he knows America's biggest problem, probably the world's biggest problem, is the Zionist international banking cartel called the Federal Reserve and the IMF and the IRS. And while we're at it, why don't we go after Washington's District of Criminals?
The economy would be stronger if interest rates were higher right now?
You would have more incentive. You would take care of the elderly. They get cheated.
That's the whole reason that the Federal Reserve is bringing interest rates to zero. That's the reason they're pumping liquidity into the market. You only do those actions right there when you realize the economy is weak. You don't do that when the economy is strong. So anybody who's out there, including Donald Trump and Joe Biden, who said the economy is strong, if it's strong, why are the interest rates down to zero and they want to go below zero for an extended period of time? They're going to be set at zero, according to the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, till 2023. That's ridiculous, guys. So they're lowering the interest rates, keeping them to zero, and pumping liquidity into the market under QE infinity, which shows that the economy is anything but strong.
Nothing for their CDs. Why cheat them and give the banks loans at 0%, and then they loan it back to the government at 3%? They're ripping us off at the expense of those on fixed incomes and the retirees.
Even though higher interest rates would make it much more expensive to borrow mortgages, borrow.
What you want is the market to determine this. Whoever thought that one person, the Federal Reserve Board chairman, knows what the money supply should be? Just in the past 6 months, M1 has gone up at the rate of 30%. That spells inflation, that spells lower standard of living and higher prices, and watch out, they're coming.
And that's what every politician is saying when they're saying they want stimulus. Just print more money. More money will get us out of this situation. If we have more money, we have more spending. If we have more spending, then we have economic prosperity. Nothing could be further from the truth. When you increase the money supply, the M1 money supply, you diminish the value of every single dollar that everyone who earned those dollars has in their possession.
If you repeal Obamacare, what's the answer? Ron Paul.
We need to get the government out of the business, and we do need to have the right to opt out of Obamacare, but we ought to have the right to opt out of everything, and the answer to it is turn it back over to the patient and the doctor relationship with medical savings accounts. So I would say that we've had too much government. I've been in medicine. It's gone downhill. Quality's gone down. Prices have skyrocketed because of the inflation.
And that's what happens. And that's what Ron Paul has been saying for decades. When you get the government involved in anything, it's a bad thing. Why is it a bad thing? Because prices always go up and quality always diminishes. Always. As a matter of fact, for years, he had a plaque on his desk that says, don't steal because the government hates competition. Government is in the business of eliminating the competition. Government is in the business of harming you and then taking credit when you kind of get healed. Said one way, one person said, government is good at breaking your legs, handing you a taxpayer-funded crutch and saying, see, if it wasn't for the government, you wouldn't be able to walk.
You need to get a market force in there, but medical savings account. But this mess has been created, it's a bipartisan mess, so it's been there for a while. So what
a bipartisan mess. So what you got there is Ron Paul illuminating another problem that we have, not just the Federal Reserve, not just the IMF, not just the IRS, not just Washington's District of Criminals, but the fact that we have a left versus right paradigm lie that people are absorbed in and involved in and being distracted, deceived, and divided by. So you got this guy, this bright, shining beacon who's standing by principle, not playing politics and telling people not what they want to hear. They're telling Americans what they need to hear. And a lot of people just don't like that, especially when they're in the political realm.
we need is a doctor-patient relationship and medical savings account where you can deduct it from your taxes and get a major medical policy. Prices then would come down.
Exactly what Ron Paul said. I don't always say that, but I'm going to say it right now.
My plan of cutting the budget by $1 trillion does deal with Medicaid, and that is that it preserves it, and there is a transition period with a goal that eventually we would hope to move that back into the economy, but right now it would be too much to do it in 1 year. You know, finding $1 trillion was a job and a half, and getting rid of five departments. So yes, my budget takes into consideration health care for the elderly, health care on Medicaid, as well as child health care. At the same time, we deal with the bailouts, the banks, and all the benefits that they get from the financial system. Because what we're facing today is the crisis, and this housing crisis. If I could just have 1 second on that. We face a housing crisis once again because it's price fixing. They're fixing the prices of these mortgages too high, and this is why nobody will buy them. This is why you have to get rid of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, sell all of that into the marketplace. And the reason they do this...
And this is why they didn't select, not elect Ron Paul, because the people were for Ron Paul. I was a delegate to the national convention at the state convention in Norman, Oklahoma back in 2012. And I saw behind the scenes exactly what was going on. Ron Paul won Oklahoma by a landslide. But when Mary Fallon, who's the governor of Oklahoma, came through there, they saw to it that it was a huge convention hall. They pulled the curtain on the Ron Paul crowd. They cut our mics. They didn't let us talk. They cut off our electricity on that side. They turned our lights off. We had to go and continue our convention in the parking lot. They called us parking lot patriots. You can look it up on YouTube. It's probably still there right now, but they were completely dishonest with Ron Paul. He clearly won Oklahoma by a landslide. They gave it to Mitt Romney anyway. And then when they moved on to the national convention in Tampa that year, you saw Boehner, who's the Speaker of the House at that time, just reading the teleprompter. It didn't matter what the people in the audience said. The yays or nays didn't count from the people, and the majority of those people were for Ron Paul. They gave it to Romney anyway. You can see the behind-the-scenes stuff. It's all over YouTube. You can still get it. So this is a selection process, not an election process. The people in 2012 wanted Ron Paul to be the president, and if he was, I wonder how different things would be right now. You would have had the end of Obama's first term, Ron Paul becoming president. And now, no doubt that when he finished 2012 all the way to 2016, he probably would have got reelected to 2020. And you'd be seeing the end of Ron Paul's presidential slot of 8 years at this time. But they didn't want him in there. Why didn't they want him in there? Because they need a banker yes man. And Ron Paul was not a banking yes man. He wasn't a politician. He was more like, a statesman. He was gonna stand by his principles no matter what. It's the free market, it's peace, it's liberty, it's honest trade, and no entangling alliances with any nation. So there's a couple clips right here. I wanted to show you this little spar right here, a minute and 32 seconds with Rick Santorum.
Congressman Paul, you've questioned the conservative fiscal...
Here's the honesty. Here's the brutal honesty of Ron Paul and the kind honesty of Ron Paul.
Conservative credentials of all these gentlemen, but particularly this week, Senator Santorum. You have a new television ad that labels him a fake. Why?
Because he's a fake.
I'm real, Ron. I'm real.
Congratulations.
I'm real.
I'm real. Congratulations.
No, I find it really fascinating that when people are running for office, they're really fiscally conservative. When they're in office, they do something different. And then when they explain themselves, they say, oh, I want to repeal that. So the senator voted for No Child Left Behind, but now he voted for it, but now he's running on the effort to get rid of it. So I think the record is so bad, with the politicians. And, nobody accuses me of not having voted for.
That's how honest he was. The record is so bad with politicians. Politicians are such hypocrites and liars. Here's Ron Paul on a national debate stage, a presidential debate stage, calling out all the politicians for just being lying hypocrites, which is exactly what they are. And everybody knows it.
Too much. They're always accusing me for not voting for enough. And I've been running in office off and on for a good many years. And over all those years, I've never voted for a budget deficit. I never voted to increase the national debt. Matter of fact, there's only one appropriation bill that I voted for, and that was for veterans. I assumed from the 1970s on that we were embarking on a very dangerous path, and we're involved in that danger right now.
And what he's referring to right there in the 1970s on was August 15th, 1971, where Nixon closed the gold window and decoupled gold, sound money, from our currency, all in the name of keeping our dollar safe from the speculators. So that's what he's referring to. And ever since then, gold has gone up and the value of the dollar has completely been trashed and diminished up to the present time, where we got this COVID-19 thing, which is nothing more or less than a smokescreen for the elites, the Zionist international banking cartel, to bring in their new world order, one world reserve currency, digital dollar.
So this idea of being fiscally conservative, now that we're running for office and we're going to repeal something that we did before, I mean, it loses credibility is what our problem is. So.
Yep, and credibility and character is everything. Here's one more really good clip from Ron Paul on job creation.
My approach is slightly different, where I think all for less taxes and less regulations. We recognize this. But I emphasize the fact that you have to know why we have a recession and why we have unemployment before you can solve the problem. And the financial bubbles are created by excessive credit and stimulation by the Federal Reserve. And then you have bubbles and you have to have a correction. This stimulus creates excessive debt and malinvestment. As long as you don't correct that and you maintain the debt and the malinvestment, you can't get back to economic growth again. Unfortunately, so far, what we have done is we have not liquidated the debt. We have dumped the debt on the American people through TARP funding and as well as the Federal Reserve. So the debt is dumped on the people. And what did we do? We bailed out the people that were benefiting during the formation of the bubble. So as long as we do that, we're not going to have economic growth. We did the same thing in the Depression. The Japanese are doing it right now. So it's time we liquidate the debt and look at monetary policy and then, of course, lower taxes. And I would like to do in the first year, cut $1 trillion, because that is the culprit. Big spending and big government.
And that is why they didn't select Ron Paul. One more. Here's Ron Paul on abolishing the TSA.
Congressman Paul, this same line, you want to abolish the TSA. What would exist in its place?
with the airlines that are responsible for carrying their cargo and their passengers. I mean, why should we assume that a bureaucracy can do better? And look at the monstrosity we have at the airports. These TSA agents are abusive. Sometimes they're accused of all kinds of sexual activities on the way they maul people at the airports. So the airlines could do that.
Your best at LAX tonight.
Can you imagine that? Having to get up on a debate stage and spell out the fact that everybody knows that TSA is involved in radiation and molestation practices in airports across the country. And why wouldn't you want to abolish the TSA?
I would think the airlines should treat passengers as well as a company that hauls money around, and they protect their money. They have private guards, and they could do it. Just remember, 9/11 came about because there was too much government. Government was more or less in charge. They told the pilots they couldn't have guns, and they were told never to resist. They set up the stage for all this. So no, private markets do a good job in protecting, much better than this bureaucracy called the TSA, let me tell you.
Let me ask you about something else.
That was it. So Ron Paul had a stroke today, and it's sad, but he's according to all indications from his Facebook page and his Twitter account, he is recovering. There's him right there giving the thumbs up, and he says, "I'm doing fine. Thank you for your concern." So big shout out to Ron Paul there. That's Dr. No. Is in Congress for over 3 decades and didn't sign anything that would take away 1 ounce of freedom from the American people. So guys, I really appreciate you joining me. If you enjoyed this content and you want to support this channel, one of the best ways you can do that is by liking and sharing this video with everybody you know, everywhere you can on social media. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification icon. Also, subscribe to my private email list through my website, highimpactflix.com. And I have a new website called highimpacttv.com where you're going to get undiluted, unvarnished, censorship-free truth without third-party tyrants telling us what we can or can't talk about. All those links are in the description below and in the pinned comment, and I will see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video. While we have time and it still retains some of its perceived value, maybe it'd be a good idea to convert your worthless fiat into valuable, storable food. Don't be the one who waits till the food riots start happening. You don't want to be fighting panicking people in the store over that last jar of peanut butter. At Prepare with High Impact Flicks, you can get up to 3 air and watertight gasket sealed ammo cans, each filled with a 4-week emergency supply. 7 food varieties, 2,000 calories a day, 284 servings, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and each meal comes in a resealable, heavy-duty 4-layered pouch. And it's got a 25-year shelf life. Every order of a 4-week supply gets you $100 off plus free shipping. Here's how simple it is to make. I'm going to cook up some Granny's home-style potato soup. People are going to think I'm a culinary hero. You open the pouch, boil 4.5 cups of water, stir the contents, simmer on low heat for 15 to 20 minutes, take it off the heat, then let it set for 2 to 3 minutes before you serve it up. Man, this stuff's so good. People are going to think Granny stopped by and filled your kitchen with a whole bunch of love. Well, if Granny does stop by, she's going to fill your behind with a whole bunch of buckshot if you keep talking with your mouth full. Wipe your dang beard off. It's embarrassing. So maybe convert some of your worthless fiat into valuable food while you still can. Order now and get $100 off of up to 3 4-week emergency food supplies at preparewithhighimpactflix.com. The link is in the description.